doing DeFi, greatest in the world, and they finally about to see why. What you know about XRD? I'm smart money, I ain't never on a decline. What you know about NFTs? It's not just Ace, when you finally gonna realize you need scalability, need more utility, then you better call on these guys. I'm going radical, I'm going Radix, I'm going radical, I'm going Radix. Hyperspeed DeFi, never on a decline, building the future, I feel like a savage.
Hello and welcome. I am Piers Ridyard, CEO of RDX Works, a core developer of the decentralized finance protocol Radix, a public ledger entirely focused on bringing DeFi into the mainstream. This is our podcast, The DeFi Download, a show about decentralized finance and all things crypto, where we dive into the details of the assets, products, and services that are powering the DeFi revolution. Today, I'm joined by Chris Bradbury, CEO of SummerFi. SummerFi provides a curated experience of the best dApps in DeFi to provide the simplest and easiest place to borrow and earn crypto. Today, SummerFi is currently managing over $4.5 billion of crypto assets in different DeFi protocols, and in the last 30 days, they have done $663 million worth of lend-borrow volume and are currently automating over $275 million worth of loan positions. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, welcome. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you. So let's start off with just, the basics. What's your background and how did you get into crypto?
Yeah. So I'm a product manager pretty much in fintech prior to crypto. So always been in startups or growth companies. Got into crypto in 2018, joining MakerDAO as one of their first product managers there. Kind of always been responsible for kind of like the UI, like B2C UI interfaces or apps and so on. And that was what I was brought into Maker for, because they had a number of front ends coming up as they just launched single collateral DAI with kind of multi-collateral DAI on the horizon. And yeah, kind of it's been a pretty wild journey since then. Still pretty much on the same project, even though we've taken it kind of through multiple iterations and so on. But yeah, kind of transition from the kind of product manager role into the CEO role in 21, leading what was Oasis.app and now SummerFi.
Got it. And so like you got started in crypto in 2018, right in the middle of one of the hottest protocols around, which was MakerDAO and the sort of DAI. What have you taken from that experience? And like how's that changed how you were as a product manager before you started product managing crypto applications?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things, like joining Maker, like the biggest shock I think I had really was at the time, like obviously Facebook and like Mark Zuckerberg and everything was like, it was like move fast and break things, move fast and break things, like test and iterate. And when it came to crypto, there was like, what I quickly learned is like, no, it has to be like, there's no time pressure here. Like it has to just be right the very first time. I remember the first time speaking to the smart contract, like engineers and so on, I joined Maker, and it was kind of like, no, like this will take as long as it takes. For example, like if we get this wrong, everything breaks. We can't reverse the transactions. We can't fix it later. We can't make a change later on. It's all immutable and so on. So kind of coming into at that point where we couldn't make a mistake, like that was a pretty big culture shock, particularly just coming from this kind of thing of like, okay, let's just test, let's iterate, let's put almost like fake buttons on places like we were kind of doing in the kind of like fintechy world, in some ways, like testing if people would click a button and then building the feature and so on, or putting a button that looked real and letting people sign up to it and so on, like and that was the next thing as well, like everything being so anonymous. Having no idea who your users are, like no idea where in the world they are, like just having this wallet address, and you could build up a mental picture maybe of who like a single user was maybe, or something like that, based on like what assets they had in their wallet. That's also far different today than it was in 2018. Like most people had maybe like ETH, if they were using Maker back then, they were maybe fans of Maker, so they had MKR in their wallet, maybe Psy or DAI at the time. And it was fairly basic. Like there was a couple of DeFi protocols out there, and then obviously like DeFi Summer 2020 or whatever just like changed the game. Like all of the kind of like farming tokens, like literally like whatever vegetable you could imagine, there was a token for it and so on. And it kind of felt like move fast and break things.
Yams was a big one. Yams, pickle,
right?
Sushi swap.
Like absolutely, yeah. And it's like it's not much, but it's an honest day's work meme. Just everywhere, right? With like the farmer, and so on. And it was an interesting moment because it felt like move fast and break things suddenly came back into crypto. There was protocols being released at a weekend and then being exploited on like a Tuesday, and so on, or being built at a hackathon and released on the Monday morning and so on. And suddenly we were like in this thing where it was a race to get a token out that can be farmed and dumped as quickly as possible. And yeah, it felt like it changed DeFi a little bit, but now it feels like we've moved on a lot again from then, and maybe gone back to maybe not quite the 2018 roots and so on, where I think there was still just a handful of protocols and everything was so like perfect in some ways. Like the amount of conversations we had internally at Maker around, oh, this needs to be formally verified and we can't release anything until formal verification's done, and all of the audits and so on. And it feels like a different game now, like the audit contests and so on now that we've got. And so on. It's just as an industry growing up, but yeah, that step, like day one of like move fast and break things to like it'll be ready when it's ready. And at Maker in particular, we had this kind of coming soon TM meme, and it was like I think the code was like the blog post went out in 2018 that the code was ready. It was like another year before it was even released,
right,
and so on. And I think even then, like it wasn't even all the code that was ready. Like there was bits that hadn't even been started, I think, at that point for like certain like small modules on the side and so on. So yeah, it was a fascinating time back then, and everyone just working towards the same goal. Like you didn't really have this forking of projects or like kind of vampire attacks and so on. It was a very different time, and it was yeah, no better, no worse. But
there's been
yeah.
I think sort of many interesting iterations. I think that the expression that people often say in terms of crypto is speedrunning the history of finance, I think is a really good way of describing it. And each cycle is essentially maybe a decade or 2 decades worth of financial history, and we just sort of go through it at ridiculous pace.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What was the so can you just explain a little bit about how Oasis was created, why Oasis was created by MakerDAO, how that became a thing, and then how Oasis became SummerFi?
Yeah, certainly. So during Single Collateral DAI, just launched at the end of 2017, we had our CDP dashboard, like this gray UI. That it took about 7, 8, 9 transactions to be able to mint DAI. At the time, like you had to convert your ETH to WETH, then wrap your WETH to PETH, and so on. And that was already there when I joined, and likewise with Henry, the head of design there as well. And one of the first jobs really was to say, hey, let's build a nice UI that can wrap all of this stuff up. Some of the engineers had started building like the proxy contracts. They had DS proxy, like the first proxy contract there back in the day that's still used widely today. And they started to build like a nice UI. And I think late 2018, maybe early 2019, they released the CDP portal, which was like this nice interface, this one-click action to be able to borrow, like deposit ETH and borrow DAI in one transaction, and so on, which was really, really nice. But coming up to the launch of multi-collateral DAI, they wanted a front end that was like more like a community kind of based front end in some ways. So they didn't want a front end hosted on MakerDAO.com. The hope was that like they would create the protocol, and then multiple front ends would spin out and build on top of the Maker protocol and so on. Like that was always the kind of long-term vision. And even when I joined in 2018, like that was told to me like, hey, like you'll be in charge of the front ends or like product manager for the front ends. But the plan is that like it will just move into the community eventually. Like it will probably become like its own entity, and it'll be in competition with other front ends and so on. Exactly as played out. But yeah, with the launch of multi-collateral DAI, so like kind of late summer, or yeah, mid to late summer, like July, August time in 2019, yeah, it was decided that it would be on a completely separate domain. And at the time, there wasn't obviously a huge amount of users in DeFi, so like we had to use we wanted a name and a brand that was already trusted by users in DeFi, and associated some way with Maker. And the very first on-chain DEX, originally called Simple Market, was branded Oasis.app. So back in Make, it was the first place you could trade like MKR and DAI. If you remember, single collateral DAI, you had to, in order to pay your stability fee, you had to also pay some MKR. So you had to go and buy MKR somewhere with the DAI, often that you borrowed or with ETH or whatever. So this was the very first place that you could buy DAI or buy MKR. I think pre-Uniswap in those days and everything. So yeah, like we had this brand name Oasis Dex. Oasis Dex are kind of gone at that point. I think they changed it to ETH to DAI and so on. So we had this like kind of Oasis brand hanging around a little bit. So yeah, we like everyone in the maker community. Exactly. Yeah. Removed the word Dex and just put the word app at the end, and effectively combined 3 apps into one. So we had Oasis Borrow, which was the main MCD protocol, like the way to like deposit multi-collateral and borrow DAI against it. We had Oasis Save within there, which was the DSR, so easy ways to save on your DAI. And then we had Oasis Trade, which was now this new, like, was basically the Oasis Dex interface, putting it back under the Oasis brand as a slightly new version of the UI of a couple more added features and so on. It had the direct swap functionality as well, so you could market trade if you weren't up for like limit orders and so on. But yeah, so everything got kind of put onto this Oasis.app brand, and everybody that was associated with Maker already still knew it as Maker. Like it was incredibly well trusted. It was one of our kind of key pillars from the very start when building UIs for Maker, that it had to be a trusted UI. Like we knew that it was going to be like 99% like Maker was going to be hugely successful at that point. Like what we were building was something like kind of groundbreaking in DeFi. Like no one's got close yet replicating something anywhere like near the same scale, was kind of minting its own stablecoin and doing it, ignoring kind of like USDC and so on, like a pure DeFi protocol. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if we imagined it would get to like the 10 billion or whatever it got to so quickly in like 21, 22 times. But yeah, so the protocol had to be, the UI had to be a trusted entry point to the protocol. And that Oasis brand kind of did that for us. But then fast forwarding to like 2021, the Maker Foundation was dissolving. The Maker Foundation had kind of done its job. Like its core job was effectively to build the MakerDAO or the Maker protocol, get it live, make sure it was stable and so on, get the governance process going, and ultimately hand it over to governance, which happened around June 21. At the same time, we took Oasis.app out of the Maker Foundation and into its own entity, exactly as we kind of talked about before, being another front end. There was already other front ends you could access Maker from at the time as well, like DeFi Saver, Instadapp, and so on. So there was already this community of front ends, which was really nice. And yeah, we took the product out and then very, very quickly built a ton of features on top of it. One thing we couldn't do when we were in Maker was it was meant to be kind of more like a reference implementation for the Maker protocol, when there was no features on top of it. So one of the first things we did was build Multiply. We knew that most users were using it to kind of like lever up their assets and stuff on the Maker protocol. Like they were like borrowing against their ETH, using the DAI to buy more ETH and depositing it back in again. Like we could see that in all the data. People were doing 4, 5, 6 transactions at a time. And yeah, after a couple of months, like the first feature we added there that we had a ton of evidence for, like going back to like the product management days, especially in DeFi, like user interviews, like we use the jobs to be done framework and so on. And yeah, built Multiply, and it was hugely, like still today, like one of our most successful products, or is the most successful product we've ever launched since we split into our own company. Across all the protocols we support now, people can do all these actions in one transaction. And it's hugely beneficial, and it actually opened the door to everything. So that was like our kind of bedrock to all of the user added features on it. But when we split out into its own entity, our ultimate plan was to say, hey, we don't really just want to be a Maker front end. We actually want to be like a trusted front end for DeFi, or like for the trusted DeFi protocols. And that's kind of where we are today, like this curated experience. We try not to call ourselves an aggregator, because we don't just support every protocol that's available to be supported. We only choose the kind of best protocols available with the best assets and so on. Effectively, if we wouldn't use it internally, then we don't support it on the app to allow others to use it. So we trust it with our own money, and that way we allow others to trust it with their money.
So what protocols what DeFi apps do you currently support?
So we've still got Maker on there, and then we've got Maker's SubDAO project Spark on there. We've got Aave, we've got Morpho, and we've got Arjuna as well, which was another new project actually by some ex-Maker engineers, and well, just ex-Maker people actually, as a combination of people from the ex-MakerDAO team on there working that released that product as well, which was really nice. And then it's the main assets. We don't support every asset that's available on Aave and so on. Again, the ones that we know, there's evidence that users want, there's evidence that users are using in kind of large numbers. It's not just like one or two users with big bags like borrowing against it, which kind of make it maybe slightly more risky pool and so on. But yeah, create this new thing. And as part of that brand and rebrand to kind of like say, hey, we're a DeFi front end, we rebranded it SummerFi last July. Kind of playing on the DeFi summer, that kind of sunny, fun feeling, like kind of theme and brand, but also trying to maintain our kind of the trust and the trust element that we've built up over time in DeFi. And now I think we've got about most amount of collateral managed in as a service provider in DeFi.
Yeah, I think so. Let's dive into that a little bit. So, of that sort of 4.5 billion of crypto assets that you currently have under SummerFi, what's that split up into roughly in terms of assets and protocols?
Yeah, so it's effectively that's all collateral, or collateral in the sense of like it's either collateral that's being borrowed against or collateral that's being lent to other protocols, and so on in there. So the majority is still ETH or ETH variants. Ultimately, especially now, like wrap staked ETH, I think is still the most popular. On there, like it was really interesting to see that transition from ETH to wrap staked ETH kind of like go as it did. In a way, wrap BTC is still a hugely popular asset. Wrap BTC really took its time to get going in DeFi.
It did,
and actually kind of going back a little bit in time, like the conversations internally at Maker and within Maker governance at the time was like it was a chicken and egg problem, because there was a lot of like kind of community push to say, hey, support WBTC, but it was basically zero WB. There was hardly any WBTC on Ethereum at the time, and then but Maker opting to add it as a collateral and allowing users to borrow it suddenly saw this huge influx of WBTC onto Ethereum, which was the best call they could have made at the time. But yeah, they're still obviously the big ones. Like you see a lot of USDC usage now. Obviously, we are very high DAI domination. I think just with the history of Maker and the pure DeFi users and so on. But ETH wrap BTC. And the ETH ones in particular, because we have a lot of like yield loop products under our Earn kind of section of the app, where you can go from like 1x to 9x on the wrap stake to ETH, or any kind of like any LST to ETH, basically, and also stable coins as well. But a lot of users start to yield loop that, like again, that same kind of that you could do manually. You can deposit the collateral, you can borrow the debt, you can swap the debt to the collateral token again, deposit in again, borrow more debt. We allow you to do that in just one transaction, maybe two if you need an allowance, depending on what the tokens and stuff is.
Right.
But yeah, it's all done in one transaction. And then most importantly, you can do the close in one transaction as well. Which, yeah, if there's a market crash, if it's like June 22 again, when like Lunar Terror and all the things that happen there, Celsius and Three Arrows and so on, like having that option to click close in one hit and one transaction was hugely valuable to users. And yeah, I mean, not great for our stats, trading stats, it looked great. For the collateral managed, obviously it looked terrible. It was like dropping like a stone. But from our point of view, we helped users get out the market quicker.
Sure. And I think with these leverage products, it's the obviously the leverage makes the yields more attractive. If you're just leveraging up your staked ETH position, you can suddenly go from whatever the ETH yield is at the moment, 2 or 3%, to significantly above that. You say 9 loops, so depending on what your loan to value is, maybe doubling, tripling your yield.
Yeah, I think at the moment actually it's around 10%. But just look on here at the moment, wrap staked ETH. Yeah, the 7-day average is 13.7%.
13.7%. So obviously that's very attractive, but it makes the position a lot more volatile. So if there's a price movement in Ethereum, things can get a little bit hairy. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about automations and how your automations help borrowers on your platform manage these positions, especially when they're a little bit more spicy than your normal borrow lend or your normal like sort of collateralized DAI creation.
Yeah. So actually most of the automations are primarily focused on users of the more boring products, like the multiply products. So if you're like 2-3x on ETH DAI or wrap BTC DAI or USDC or something like that, you can enable you can enable them on the yield loops as well, particularly stop loss, and so on. But I mean, stop loss, like we have a tab on there that kind of tries to explain all the risks and so on there. Like obviously the biggest risk with like the yield loops you were just talking about is obviously it's the peg risk. So it's like how close is like basically staked ETH to ETH to 1. Obviously prior to the enabling of withdrawals, I think it was November 22. I think it was like we had that real issue where the peg dropped to I think like 96. Like 0.96 to 1. And there was big concern. InstaDApp had that huge InstaDApp Lite vault that I think had to be bailed out at one point because it got very close. And that would have just caused cascading liquidations through everything at that point, even people taking a little less risk and so on. So we have a stop loss there. But again, that comes with warnings that you need to be aware with that actually, even if you stop loss out of the product at that point, because you've got so much, your yield looped so much as well that you're still not going to get much back. And like I personally have like a large chunk of my portfolio in one of these yield loop positions, and I don't have the automation turned on for that one. I do on the kind of ETH DAI ones and so on. But in my mind, it's probably like as an industry, we basically need the peg to restore. If that peg fails, then the entire industry is done anyway. So even in some ways, kind of, is it worth being stopped out at that point? Maybe not. But the more likelihood is the peg will recover, like we saw it do anyway. And at that point, you can't. It's so hard, and it's such a kind of mental turmoil. But maybe you want the peg to recover. Like it's better betting on the peg recovery at that point again, because especially if you are like 9x, 10x. The amount of excess you've got in there is pretty low. That's like 92, 93% LTV. And if the peg has gone down by 5-6% at that point as well, then maybe if you said it's 99%, but then you risk getting stop lossed out at a bad price anyway. And so on. So that really the automations are really there for the people like kind of like multiplying your kind of ETH, BTC and so on against DAI and USDC.
Let's make it simple. What is an automation and why is it powerful?
So the automations we got on SummerFi are entirely like non-custodial kind of automation bots. Basically, you can set against any of your positions depending on the type of automation. Stop loss is probably the easiest one to explain, and it's based on LTV. So if you go and set your LTV to be 60%, as the price drops, your LTV actually increases. So at 60%, you're 2.5x on like exposure to the market. Let's say it's ETH DAI. But what you could say is, and what I personally use is I try and keep my vault around 60%, and I have a stop loss at 65%. So if the price drops, that pushes my vault to 65%. These automation bots, and they're just smart contracts that you sign a transaction to enable it, give it permission to do a very specific thing in very specific circumstances, and no one can adjust that. Like no one other than yourself can adjust that. No one can disable it. No one can like fake a number unless you somehow hijack the Oracle or manipulate the Oracle feeds or something. But if the LTV crosses, according to the oracles that we use, if it's Maker, it's the Chronicle oracles. If it's Aave, it's the Chainlink oracles, for example. If the oracles report that it would be, and obviously you've got multiple oracles to calculate the LTV. If at that instantaneous moment in time the price is greater than, or the LTV is greater than 65%. These smart contracts will just close your vault, basically. And you, when you set that up, you have the option to close it to either ETH or the collateral token or the debt token. If it's to the collateral token, it just closes it to your vault. So you've got the collateral in your vault if you want to reopen it again, or you can withdraw it, but it's a little bit cheaper on gas. If it's a debt token, it sends it to your wallet. So that's the most simple. We actually launched our stop loss feature on Maker about 24 hours before Lunar Terror had its very first kind of wobble and first crash, and it was a huge kind of test by fire moment. And I think some of the engineers were like up for about 72 hours nonstop, trying to like just like firefight and like make improvements to the logic and make sure they're getting through and so on. But it actually proved hugely valuable. Like I think we had 150 vaults enable automation within the first 20 hours of turning it on. Like tons of users added it. It's kind of a no-brainer. Like if you've got a volatile position, the concept of like adding you don't lose anything in my mind adding a stop loss, for example, because if you go to sleep and the market crashes, you're going to get stop lossed out before the liquidation point. Most protocols charge a liquidation fee of around 10 to 13% and so on. And also you can set your stop loss at a much higher point before the liquidation. So you can actually get out before the prices drop that far, because actually most people only keep their vault around 50%. But yeah.
So basically, just to read that back to you, you're opening a borrow position, which means that you're posting some crypto asset as collateral. And when you borrow against that crypto asset, let's say I'm posting ETH as collateral, and I'm minting DAI. I have a LTV, loan to value ratio, that I'm comfortable with. And so if we're saying 60% loan to value, we're saying that if I put on $100 of ETH, I'm minting $60 worth of DAI.
Yep.
And what the stop and the I can't remember what's the ratio required by Maker for ETH versus DAI?
Well, they have multiple, but yeah, probably around 65-70% maybe. They do collateral ratios, so it's like reversed, like 1 over. But yeah, it's around 70%, 65-70%.
So 70%, what will happen is my ETH will be sold off by the protocol to rebuy back DAI and repay my loan, essentially. But that happening is going to be very expensive for me, because there's a haircut applied to the assets. The assets may be sold at less than market value, and there's a fee that you're going to be paying to the protocol. So what the stop loss does for you is it says, hey, I actually want you to start selling at 65% and zeroing out my position, avoiding this automatic haircut occurring, and also potentially avoiding being too pro-cyclical with the rest of the market, because I'm going to be selling before other people are, because if lots of people are at similar ratios to me and they all hit this position at the same time, you may have a load of ETH coming onto the market simultaneously, which depresses the price and creates more secondary effects. So this is what the stop loss is for. This is what the automations are for.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not risk-free. It does create a market sell order, and so on. Like, we do have logic within the contracts and so on, where it has to try and sell within a certain price and so on. It keeps trying again, and it tries again, and so on. And everything is put through flashbots and so on mainnet, at least, to stop front running and so on. But there is definitely risks where you can't guarantee the price that the user is going to get, and it will try and it will try again. There is a certain condition that if it's likely to be liquidated, or within like 2%, I think it is, of liquidation, it actually just says, hey, let's just get this through if it can get a price better than liquidation, and so on. But different protocols also liquidate in different ways, which creates their own risks as well. So if they've got the kind of like reverse, like Dutch auction methods and so on, like they take a bit of time to find the market price, and if the price is constantly dropping as well, it's taking even longer to get to that price at times. So not always super long, but like, yeah, it's taking a bit of time. And then 22, we saw the markets drop incredibly fast. And so on. There's also risks, obviously, like oracles can like struggle, like if the network becomes incredibly congested, then the gas cost to fire this, we do try and recoup the gas costs from the users, although it is capped at a certain level, so it can't be like, it's not extortionate, and so on. But yeah, it's not risk-free, but generally, like if you've got all those risks in automation as well, you've got exactly the same risk of even trying to close it yourself, or even liquidation having the same effects as well. So again, it seems, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's the lowest risk option, in my mind. And we see a lot of our users, it's about 20% of eligible users always turn this on, and so on.
Interesting.
And
super interesting.
Yeah.
And so like looking forwards, you guys are at 4.5 billion now. You're at 663 million 30-day Lem borrow volume. You've just released your new points-based system. Like, what's your growth plans from here? Where do you want to get to? And how's this points-based system going to help you guys achieve that?
Yeah. So yeah, last week we just launched Raise, this point system, which effectively rewards users for using SummerFi and managing their positions through SummerFi. It's all part of the journey that we're on kind of this year to kind of grow as a company, and also like take our next step in kind of DeFi, basically. So the current app it's a fairly sophisticated, like borrow lending and DeFi is a fairly sophisticated activity. Like it's for sophisticated users, pretty much, or semi-sophisticated users, like even the kind of understanding the LTVs and so on. And we know the audience for that. Like we're not getting like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of users into this kind of fairly advanced side of DeFi. And actually what we truly believe is actually if we want to bring like the next 100 million people on chain, then we actually need to be able to take a product to where the users are today, like where their money already is, and take a product to them which actually kind of does the job that they're wanting to do. And in most cases, and we can just look at evidence of a ton of other like traditional finance apps out there, which is just ideally earn a slightly better than market beating rate, like make them feel like they're winning and they're beating the market, and offer them a product which can hopefully very safely and sustainably earn them a yield, which is better. So yeah, launching the Raise campaign and so on is to reward our current users and so on. But it's kind of the first step in a journey over the kind of like next six to 8 months of us ultimately culminating in us releasing like a new Summer Earn protocol, which is going to have the same sort of principles of like curated experience, at least initially, and so on, of like the best protocols and the best ways to earn. And the ultimate plan really is to distribute that and kind of onboard it, build it in a way where it's going to be integratable in a future kind of like Web2 TradFi world as well. So understanding what it is they want from it in the future, and building integration kits and getting it integrated to where users already store their money today. Like, I don't think, like, we talk about bringing 100 million people on chain and so on. Like, I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that like 100 million people are going to be using protocol interfaces, like fragmenting their money into like tiny little bits, or kind of it, like, or even maybe at a high risk, not fragmenting their money at all and putting it all into one protocol or one asset and so on.
So what does the product that 100 million people can use look like?
So it's effectively a way, the simplest way that users can ultimately earn into DeFi without maybe even knowing they're using DeFi. So being able to deposit and have your positions automatically rebalanced continuously, so you can earn the best rates across the best protocols and the most trusted protocols within DeFi, ultimately. So in some ways, look at it as like a kind of decentralized bond ETF, ultimately. So obviously, tons of people use kind of like digital wealth managers or even traditional wealth managers and so on in those underlying products and so on. They put you into ETFs or a bunch of ETFs and so on. And those wealth managers rebalance those for you. Think of this as like the modified, like modern version of that, in a way, in a completely non-custodial solution where you will continuously be balanced based on the best available rates, and so on. So as a user, you would just deposit your, let's say, the dollars in your app, or whatever. That deposits maybe USDC, and that USDC is lent out to multiple protocols. Maybe there's certain advanced options in there that are doing maybe some fancy yield looping to extract more yield and so on, still in a safe way, and so on. And effectively from the user, if the yield on one place is starting to go down, some of that money in that bucket, and this will all be pooled assets, obviously like an ETF, will then be moved into a protocol that's maybe starting to yield a little bit higher. So as a user, you don't need to be checking your app every day. You don't need to be signing a transaction to move from one to the other, because as a user, often you're always late. Like, you see a yield, you think, 14%, that's amazing. I'm going to move my assets here from 7% into there. And in reality, within a few minutes, that might drop now back to 6%. And the place you've come from is now at 8%, and so on. So you're like, okay, let's move it back. And you're constantly chasing in some ways. So as a user, it will just be a simple deposit. And you'll be able to earn the best yields. From a DeFi point of view, it's utilizing DeFi, it's depositing liquidity into DeFi, and that actually will give like the functionality that's available on the main SummerFi app today, like the kind of pro functionality in a way. That makes that even more usable across the whole of DeFi, not just on Summer really, because the more liquidity that we can put into DeFi, the more beneficial it is then to the underlying kind of like other DeFi and advanced like financial like protocols that have been built. But yeah, if we want to onboard users from the kind of the real world, like the kind of average Joe walking along the street and so on, like, I don't think we're getting them into protocol front ends and picking pools or picking even a specific token and asking them to rebalance their protocols and so on. Like, we have to look at the way they earn money today, offer them a better return, which I think we can absolutely do within DeFi without taking any significant risk for them.
Yeah.
And we're not expecting users to deposit 100% of their like wallet into it. Like, if each user will maybe deposits like 5% of their thing, or we can integrate this into digital wealth managers. So the user doesn't maybe have to decide to.
It's essentially a savings product where the complexity is abstracted away and you maintain liquidity for the user, so the user can pull out at any time. Now, obviously, a lot of these applications, what you're describing here, sounds a lot like, Yearn finance or things that were which were talked about back in the DeFi summer days and were deployed and were popular for a while and then sort of died out a bit. So, like, what's changed between now and then that makes this more viable and more long-term likely to succeed?
Yeah, so I think we're taking a slightly different approach with that, where like those were primarily focused around like the highest possible yields, and there's a lot of work around farming the tokens, and a lot of the yield came from farming tokens and so on. Like, this is a much more just like the interface that we have today, a much more curated experience of safe and sustainable protocols. Like this will be a safe and sustainable product, and also building it in such a way where we look at how like maybe traditional products are built and how they can be integrated into the kind of the wider world and so on. And some of the kind of hurdles that we know that we're gonna have to overcome to be able to get integrated into them, like taking those considerations into the design process, ultimately all the way from the protocol design up to like kind of the SDK kit that we're building, and hopefully we'll use that to distribute into the bigger, wider like users and so on. So I still think if you look at like kind of the Yearns of the world, the Beefies and so on, they're still going after generally like the kind of semi-sophisticated users. They've got a lot of super advanced strategies and so on. Like there's definitely kind of some added risk in there and so on. And it's very difficult to really know where your money is. I think at any one time in there. Like, again, if you look at kind of what do millions and tens of millions and 100 millions of people do already, they have like pension pots and like stocks and shares and so on, and they can instantly see where their money is distributed, where they're earning. They can change their risk levels very easily and so on. We ultimately want to be able to recreate that for the average user, like, and it's the average user, which is hundreds of millions of. Right. The hard reality is there's not hundreds of millions of like power users of DeFi that are going to be doing this advanced borrowing, lending, yield looping manually and managing those positions and so on. So yeah, like we've obviously like kind of nailed our craft in some ways, targeting the kind of the DeFi power users, DeFi OGs, and so on. And effectively we'll use all the infrastructure that we've built to date to make this the best possible product to onboard those kind of 100 million users, basically, without them necessarily needing to know that they're using crypto. Like, we don't expect to onboard a huge amount of them through the SummerFi interface, for example. Like, that will be the first release, the reference implementation. But the long-term vision is actually we integrate ultimately DeFi into the much kind of like wider world and onboard normal people without them even needing to know. And so on, and how they integrate, like whether they kind of each person has an individual private key in some way, like it's ultimately up to the integrators, right? Like they could do it through kind of like combined wallets, or like kind of like a single wallet that they hold on behalf of all their users and so on. Like think of like Revolut and so on, and how they just like pool all their money together on behalf of their users. That's up to the integrators. I think ultimately we as an industry need to say, hey, we just want to be able to let these users use DeFi one way or another, use a more like advanced, transparent financial system that we've been working really hard to build. And if not every single user in the world is managing a private key, but is still deploying into DeFi, then I think that's a huge step forward. At the moment, if we consider kind of wins for crypto, just like institutions using like Bitcoin and ETH ETFs, where they're not even deploying that money into DeFi of all this, and not even using the technology that we've built over all these years, like that they shouldn't be things that we like celebrate the amount we do. It's cool for like kind of like price speculation and so on.
Just get them to put the toe in, right? It's like it's a slowly catch the monkey approach.
Yeah, but we got to make sure that we don't stop there, right? And say, hey, guys, we've succeeded. Like institutions are buying Bitcoin and ETH in these ETFs that are not using any of the technology that we've been spending years and years building and perfecting. And it's a long way from perfection still, but we've now got to see how we can take these products that we've built to those same institutions, to the same users, and actually put the money that they're investing, hopefully, into this DeFi market that can then be utilized even more and make DeFi even more powerful, and so on.
Yeah. Super interesting protocol. You guys or applicate front end. I know you guys are thinking about building a protocol later on, sort of coming in a year's time or so. When you're ready to talk about that, I'd love to have you back on the show and to go through that. But for now, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to learn more about SummerFi, where should they go and how should they get started?
First place is just summer.fi. Please make sure you spell it right and so on, and check, do all the usual checks and so on. But yeah, summer.fi, all the links are on there as well. I think with summerfinance _ on Twitter or X, whatever it's called these days, on there as well. But yeah, summer.fi is the main place, and you'll get find everything you need on there. If you've got any questions, join our Discord, and we can, we've always got people online to help you, and community members as well.
Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been great.
Need more utility, then you better call on these guys. I'm going radical, I'm going Radix, I'm going radical, I'm going Radix. Hyperspeed DeFi, never on a decline. Building the future, I feel like a savage.